Cultural decay is the topic for this episode. I was going to say today, but I don't like rhyming. It upsets me when I'm rhyming. No.
Man, it's a crazy time, man. It's like, we keep talking about like what I don't know, we keep, I've heard us, we both say it. I mean, everybody says it, right? That's paying attention is like, well, when's it time?
Yeah.
Time. Or, we always hear, well, you see somebody posturing. I mean, you remember when Trump was in, I mean, you had when he bombed, when he killed that Iranian. Soleimani. I mean, like, oh, it's going to be World War III or China's World War III or, I mean, all this shit, right? Dude, World War III is already in progress. And like when people talk about Civil War, World War III, all this, it's been going on. It's already in progress. Like the rest of the world, like the other superpowers or whatever you want to call them, the other countries that are enemies are like they're playing chess while we as the United States of America are playing checkers.
Shit, we're not even playing checkers. We've flipped the board over entirely. You know what I mean? Yeah. We've flipped the board over and now we're trying to build a child's toy out of the fucking checkers. I mean, we're not even. You're giving us too much credit here. And it is. So. It's the a lot of people refer to our group. It used to be called the silent majority. Now they're calling it the exhausted middle, like the middle 80% of the country that's just tired of everybody's bullshit. And it seems like from the data that I've seen, and I've talked to Brett Weinstein about this. I've talked to a number of other people on and offline about this. It seems like it's about 13, 14% wild-ass people on the left, 7 to 8% wild-ass people on the right, and then the middle 80, who is just like, fucking leave me alone, dude. I want to live my life. And there is I hate to go back to Tricky Dick, right, to Richard Nixon, but we do have to think about this exhausted middle and figure out a way to activate that people. And the way that happens, I talked to Alec Ross on Wednesday this week on American Party. Brilliant guy, very smart on numbers and economics, very smart on cultural stuff. Now, he's a liberal, but he and I agreed on pretty much everything, and that should tell you something. It should tell you that most people, like he and I are going to disagree on the small parts. Like, actually, I think we should, bend this page a little bit like this, and then we'll get a better result. And he goes, yeah, but think about this, and if you bend that page, this happens. And he and I can have that conversation, right? The right and the left or whomever can have those conversations, and that conversation is important to make sure we don't miss anything, right? So it's like a fucking filter and then another filter. We put it through both, and then we make sure that everybody that we can fucking help gets help. In whatever way that means, if it's healthcare, if it's national security, if it's making sure roads are done, blah, blah, blah. But the headlines are just dominated by toxic bullshit all the time because that's what sells clicks. And then that warps people's perception of each other. Like you think, not you, but the average conservative or libertarian person has this idea of what a liberal is, and it's just not true, and vice versa. However, what the one point he did make was that what is absent in America right now is fucking leadership. It's leadership, and we need it. This exhausted middle or whatever the fuck you want to call it, they need leaders, and it's not politicians. I'm not talking about politicians. They need leadership, right? And it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, this is what's going on. I mean, I think that's the most dangerous piece of the United States of America is that, there is no leadership, right? Yep. And I think that's why you see all these different social, like people are now identifying as socially because there's no leaders.
Right.
Right? Like that's why you see all these people who are victims who play the victim card, which is a weak card. There's nothing weaker that tells you somebody is weak when they play the victim card all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, there is nothing that tells me that I can fucking drive this motherfucker in the ground and beat them at whatever I want to when they play the victim card all the time, when they can't take accountability. It tells me that they're weak and that I can beat them, right?
Yeah,
and but that's what's allowed this to happen is But if you think about it, man, it's kind of strategic for, let's just say, I don't know if you want to call it the left, if you want to call it the progressive, whatever you want to call it, right? But they've been smart about it, because what they've done is they have they've taken away every single thing that leaders strive on, and allow them to become leaders and move up to the top, and separates the strong from the weak and the leaders from the followers, right? And what they've done is they've done this by making it to where you can't hold anybody accountable.
Right. Yeah, I think Mike Ritland mentioned it on Drinking Bros earlier this week on Wednesday about how before or once Hitler became chancellor in 1933, one of the first things the Nazi regime did was start kicking people out of the military and the police who wouldn't comply with progressively more vile orders, basically, right? They used these low level I guess test balloons to see who would and wouldn't comply, and the people that would comply they kept, and the people that wouldn't they got rid of, because they knew at some point they were going to have to use that force against the people, and they're doing it right now in America. Like I don't know if it's on purpose. I don't know if they even realize they're doing it, but that's exactly what's happening. War is fucked up, and I don't know how many true warriors understand all the political ramifications of their actions, but I do know that people in politics don't understand any of the ramifications of war, right? And they don't know how to do it either. They don't know how it works.
Yeah.
It's like an oncologist might be able to tell a surgeon that there's a tumor somewhere, but the surgeon is the one that says, hey, here's how we take this fucking tumor out without damaging the body further and still keep the patient alive. There's subject matter experts in all these things. And when the subject matter experts at war are doing the things that our generals are doing now, then we've lost, right? That's a total loss for us. Now, today we're not talking about war or even subject matter experts. Really what we're talking about is cultural decay and weakness. Now, one of the things that Jordan Peterson says a lot is, or something he said in some of his books and some of his presentations, he talks about you as a man, you should be let yourself be a monster and then learn to tame that monster, because that is, you and I talk about it here all the time. The purpose of masculinity is to provide and protect. Evolutionarily speaking, that's the purpose, is to provide and protect and to teach strength and all that stuff. Peterson says people have this idea that tough men are dangerous. And he says, if you think tough men are dangerous, wait until you see what weak men are capable of, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, right? Like weak men beat women.
Yeah. He says a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very, very dangerous man who has it under voluntary control. And I agree with that. Completely agree with that statement. I think it's not because that's who I am as a person, which that is true. That's who I am as a person. But but
doesn't that come down to discipline, right? Like,
it's discipline.
Like it literally comes back to discipline, and it's not about doing what your mind, like it's about controlling your mind and not letting your mind control you, right? And all these things are habitual, right? Everything in life's habitual. If you have bad habits with eating, you have bad habits in life. If you have bad habits, you know what I mean? Like it's just everything is habitual. Everything you do is habitual. Discipline's habitual. All these things.
Yeah, that's why McCraven talks about making your bed and shit like that. That's really what it's. It's not about your bed. And
it's about creating good habits. Yeah. Creating good habits creates success. Like without creating good habits, you don't have success.
Correct.
So
like when you see that piece of trash on the ground and you're like, oh, somebody will get that. You're somebody. Get that. You know what I mean? And when I say piece of trash, I can also mean a grown man raping a woman on a fucking train while other people watch. Okay.
Yeah, man. And when I hit we were talking about war, right? Like, and when I seen this, it just really hit home and told me, well, the war's on and the enemy is winning.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why. It's the battle, shows you why. Here's my theory on it. Is it all started when you started seeing, and I would like to see some stats on this. I don't know if it's in this write-up or not. But when did we start seeing these video games desensitizing? When did we start seeing more graphic murder, like just straight blood? Like, you know what I mean? Like, when did these things start? When did reality TV become a huge hit to our society on entertaining?
I mean, graphic violence has been the hallmark of American cinema since the 1930s, honestly.
Well, but let's talk about with the progression of TVs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to watch it. I mean, I can tell you right now, like, graphic violence of watching John Wayne shoot somebody or Gunsmoke is way fucking different than watching these movies today.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. But also, I mean, when you were a kid, you may have experienced the same thing. But when I was first taught about guns, I was introduced to a shotgun and a watermelon. And the watermelon was shot with a shotgun. And I saw it with my own eyes at 4 or 5, 6 years old, whenever it was. I'm like, oh, okay, this thing can really do some damage. I don't want that to happen to my foot, right,
yeah,
or my friend.
Were you walking around talking with your friends about AR-15s and about M16s and about, like, hey, you know, would you use this grenade launcher or would you, you know, I mean, was that your topic of discussion?
We played cowboys and Indians in war all the time, yes. But not about specific weapons, I guess.
Exactly, right? So anyways, and then you turn around and you look at reality TV.
Mm.
Literally, you take fucked up lives and fucked up situations, and you're talking about somebody who knows firsthand.
Right, but I mean, you're talking about the difference between fantasy and aspirational marketing, right? So fantasy is like when people watch weird porn, there's some low-level correlation between doing weirder shit and your actual sex life, but it really doesn't come to fruition. Like more. I
do think though it's desensitization.
There is some level of it, and maybe it definitely, or maybe it has some impact downstream. There's probably some truth to that, but you're kind of sampling on a dependent variable there, because the baseline for that person would be that they're mentally unstable in the first place, typically speaking, right? So if you add anything to that concoction, it's probably going to go wrong. Most studies, there was another study done after that El Paso shooting. It showed there's no correlation between violent video games, for example, and violence in real life. But there is when the person is already mentally unstable, right? So,
but I mean, what's the effects of it of starting when you're 6 years old or 8 years old?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. So it's aspirational marketing at that point. So Joe Camel getting kids to smoke at an early age, or seeing famous actor like Humphrey Bogart smoke on screen. That's why a lot of the for a long time in the late 90s, when they were all the indoor cigarette bans were starting up and stuff, you wouldn't see smoking on movies as much. And there are some networks that didn't put smoking on television at all because they didn't want to get sued, really. But the fact is, it's the same as Islam, right? There's 2 billion Muslims on earth. If every Muslim wanted to fucking kill every non-Muslim, all non-Muslims would probably be dead by now. They would have figured it out. So it's just not true. And in the same way, the numbers for this stuff are super low, but the aspirational part, like the reality TV part, I think is more a problem and it's not a problem because of the TV show itself. It's a problem because of what we deem valuable socially. Like what social currency, like you talk about victimization. Being a victim is social currency now. You get praise for that, you get attention, whatever it is. And these kids you saw it just like 3 weeks ago, that kid was getting the shit kicked out of him in his school, and then he came back with a gun and fucking shot the guy. You know what I mean? Like that because it happens, and you know psychology is more contagious than any virus. Because that happens, and we publicize it and talk about it ad nauseum. I think the news plays a bigger role than TV or fucking video games, because they talk about this. Who is the guy that shot this person? And then the young kid at home who's trying to figure out who they are, who doesn't have a man in their life, right? An adult man that can teach them how to be a human being. They think that that's an option. Well, fuck, I have no other options. I may as well get violent. And I think that's a big fucking problem.
Yeah, again, yeah. So, I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you. I just think it decent. Like, I just think that
It does, for sure. It's up to the parents, right? To fucking, to teach kids, like, hey, this is a fantasy. Like, you're also not going to be a starting center fielder for the fucking Yankees. And you're not going to be 7 foot tall and play basketball like you do on NBA 2K. You have to contextualize this stuff for kids. They don't have a sophisticated enough mind to understand the difference between reality and fantasy sometimes.
100%.
Now, this situation we're dealing with today, man, I'm sure everybody's heard about it by now. In Philadelphia, we'll get back to the fact that the perpetrator of this crime is an illegal immigrant who's been in this country since 2012, right? We'll get back to that later. But first, I want to talk about the incident itself, and then we'll get into some of the other points. A woman was recently harassed and raped for roughly 40 minutes on a Philadelphia train, while multiple bystanders failed to do anything. They didn't intervene. They didn't call 911, nothing. And I don't know if you saw, but the Philly, I don't know if it was the police chief, somebody, state police guy. I think it was state police because he had that weird hat on.
Yeah.
The campaign looking, not a campaign hat, the one that's bent down on the sides like the Massachusetts State Police. Anyways, he pretty much lit the entire public up. Like, who the fuck do you think you are that you can stand there and let that happen in your country? And this is something we come back every day. This is why we talk about principles and not people. Don't ask me what I would have done in that situation. Don't ask what any of your quote-unquote heroes would have done or any of that bullshit. Ask yourself if it fits the principles. Did you support and defend the Constitution against all enemies? Did you do something every day to help your country, your countrymen, all men? Will you not allow those less fortunate or incapable of defending themselves to be harmed or taken advantage of in your country? No, you failed on all three. Everybody there. Of the top three goddamn principles that exist. So, let's recount the event in detail here. Yeah, go ahead.
According to police, the attacker harassed the woman for about 40 minutes. 40 minutes.
It's long enough to bake a pizza.
Before he eventually, that's preheat too. Before he eventually began ripping off her clothes, sexually assaulting and raping her as she attempted to defend herself. The man continued to assault the woman for roughly 8 minutes until the train stopped. 8 fucking minutes. And a train employee boarded the car, saw what was happening, and called 911. Dude, that's 8 minutes.
That's a long time. The light from the sun takes about 8 minutes to get here, right? The light can travel 93 million miles in 8 minutes, and your motherfucking ass can't pick up the phone and dial 911.
I'm going to start right now. So right now is the start time. So like this woman, think about this. This woman was getting raped from right now, and I'll tell you whenever it stops. The Upper Darby Township Police Department Police Superintendent Timothy Bernhardt said that while there were not dozens of people in the train car at the time, there were enough that collectively they could have gotten together and done something. Dozens? This is one fucking person.
Yeah, I mean, shit. There were 4 people on Flight 93, and the people on that flight, the passengers, essentially committed suicide to save the country from more attacks. That's what happened there. If you I know that is harsh language to use, but basically they gave up. They killed themselves along with those 4 hijackers to make sure that the White House or Capitol didn't get hit. That's what happened right there.
Yeah, and within 20 years, we go from that to sitting around and watching a woman get raped, right?
Yeah.
The police superintendent said that there were reports of bystanders filming the attack while failing to intervene. Holy fuck. If witnesses had filmed the attack and failed to intervene to stop, they could be facing criminal charges as well. I hope they should be fucking ruined.
Whether they face criminal charges or not, their name should be made public so the rest of us know who they are. Honestly, they should have to wear a scarlet letter C for coward for the rest of their goddamn lives, because this woman and her dignity and her self-respect and her fucking emotions, her standing in society have all been affected, ruined, maybe permanently for this, right? This is pathetic.
The actions of the witnesses can be attributed to what is known as so this is the bystander effect. We've heard like fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Yeah.
The bystander effect was first studied after the murder of Kitty Genovese in 1964.
You might remember this story from the very first scene from what's the name of that movie? Fucking Boondock Saints, right? Where the priest is talking about all it takes. I think it's an Edmund Burke quote. The only thing that evil needs to succeed is for good men to do nothing. Right?
Yeah.
Kitty Genovese, she was a 28-year-old bartender. She was stabbed to death outside of her apartment in Queens. She was raped and murdered by Winston Mosley just after 3 a.m. as Genovese returned to her apartment after work. Several neighbors heard her scream, but only a few of them recognized the sound as a cry for help. One of the neighbors shouted at Mosley during the attack, causing him to temporarily flee, but he returned 10 minutes later and continued the attack. Genovese was picked up by an ambulance at 4:15 a.m., but
how
died.
Does he even get back? How does he even get back?
I don't know. Like, I mean, we think of it in terms of you and I have seen a number of people get shot, blown up, etc. We've shot and blown up a number of people and had to tend to their wounds afterwards. I mean, as soon as the dude leaves, if all anybody had to do is walk down there and stand next to her, and that would have been over. Like, he would not have returned to fight somebody. That's how criminals operate. It's a path of least resistance, right? You don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the other guy.
Dude, it's crazy. Like, this is fucking insane. And you know what the most fucked up part about this is? Like, and I want to point this out. Is I guarantee you, if they were having consensual sex on the train.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody would have had something to fucking say.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you want to bet? Right? So fucking insane. Let's see. Several neighbors heard Genovese scream, but only a few of them. Oh, yeah, you talked about that.
Yeah. The New York Times published the article claiming that 38 witnesses saw or heard the attack. I don't think that's true. I think it's less than that. I think that was hyperbole. But there have been a number of studies afterwards about the bystander effect as well. So let's go into bystander effect a little bit more, and then we'll come back to the other part. The bystander effect, or bystander apathy, is a social psychological theory that states that individuals are less likely to offer help to a victim when there are other people present. And this is the most egregious egregious version of who somebody will do this, somebody else will do this, right? Like the piece of trash on the ground, somebody will pick that up. Well, you're somebody. But
it's habitual again, right? Like all these, like that, and that's what I say. Like, you know, when people are like, "Well, how did you do what you did the day you got the Medal of Honor?" Well, I've been doing this. Like, I've been standing up against the grain, like, for what's right and wrong, you know, since the day I was born, right? Or not since the day I was born, but since I can remember, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing, you don't just, like, when people say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to train like this today. I'm just going to, if I ever need to, I will." No, you won't.
Right.
No, you fucking won't, right? Like you won't do it. You'll avoid it. Like, everything is habitual. And if you can't do it when it's not needed, you won't do it when it is needed.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it works both ways. So the more you kowtow and capitulate to external pressure or fear or whatever it is, the easier it becomes to do it again. Yes. But the inverse of that is also true. The more you stand up for other people, for bullshit, the more you do kind things, the more it will just happen. Right? You won't even think about it.
And it's like with me, man. Like, I like, look, I'm an asshole, right? Check, got it. But the thing is like, I never want to sit around. And people ask me all the time, "Well, why do you have to say something? Why do you always have to say something?" Well, because it's like, look, the other day, this guy was like kind of treating his wife like shit in front of everybody, kind of like just talking down to her every time she did something, right?
Yeah.
She didn't deserve it. I don't give a fuck what their relationship is behind doors. But I'll tell you what I'm not going to do. In a crowd of people, I'm not going to sit around and not say something like, "Hey, man, you're being a real asshole." I'm not going to – I know everybody's thinking it. I'm not going to sit here and not say it because I don't want anybody else to look at me like I look at all these other fucking cowards who didn't say anything and say, "Oh, so you're okay with that? You're okay with this type of behavior?" You know what I mean? And it's like, no, I will say something because it's the right thing to fucking do.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's and again, it becomes easier to do it the more you do it. It becomes like a reflex. You know what I mean? And
Well, and people are like, well, it's not your job. Well, it became my job when they started doing it in front of me, right? Like, you exposed me to this. I didn't ask you to be this way. I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it in my presence, it became my business. It is my business.
Well, everybody wants to talk about the good old days when everybody minded their business. But here's the reality of that situation. You're on a fucking homestead somewhere in the 1830s, right? And some asshole comes by and steals some of your horses. You don't go after him alone. You drive over or ride over to your buddy's house and get 4 or 5 dudes and you go after him and fuck him up. And everybody says, yes, we're going to do that because that's the thing to do. That is the social contract you guys have, which is that we're all going to leave each other alone until it's time for us to pool our collective power together to stop evil. And that is the entire point of human civilization. So the bystander effect was first demonstrated and popularized by social psychologist John M. Darley and Bibb Latane, I guess, in 1968 after they became interested in the topic following the murder of Kenny Genovese in 1964. The researchers launched a series of experiments that resulted in one of the strongest and most replicable effects in social psychology. In a typical experiment, the participant is either alone or among a group of other participants. An emergency situation is staged, and researchers measure how long it takes the participants to intervene, if they intervene at all. The experiments have found that the presence of others inhibits helping, often by a large margin. So,
well, of course it does, because if everybody looks around, everybody looks around. Well, if somebody else can do something, but the thing is, though, again, you talk about leaders. Usually, though, if one person stands up and starts to do something, others will jump in.
That's correct.
It's just people like there has to not everybody's a fucking leader. That's just the point of it.
And you also don't have to be good at everything either. If you let's say somebody collapses, for example, and I'm not as up to date on CPR as I should be. And I mean, I personally am, but I'm just saying for a hypothetical. I start barking out. What I can do is lead, right? That's the one thing you can control in your life. You can fucking step up and lead. So maybe I can't chase after this dude, or maybe I can't fight him even. Maybe I don't have my gun on me for some reason. Maybe I don't, whatever. But somebody does, right? Somebody there can do something.
You can always do something.
So you can fucking say, hey, who knows CPR? Cool. Come do CPR on this guy until you get tired, then I'll fill in. Who's got a phone? Call 911, blah, 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 right? You could do that. So in this experiment, in one experiment rather, a woman in distress was observed by participants who were either alone with a friend or with a stranger. 70% of people who were alone called out or went to help the woman after they believed she had fallen or been hurt, but when paired with a stranger, only 40%. So a 30%, or actually that's about a 40% decrease, right? Another researcher examined over 200 sets of real-life surveillance video recordings from the UK, the Netherlands, South Africa, and found that intervention was the norm. So in 90% of conflicts, one or more bystanders intervened to provide help. Increased bystander presence can increase the likelihood that someone would intervene, even if the chance of each individual bystander responding is reduced. So they're saying that there's only a 10% chance that any one of the, this is just, I'm making this math up, but there's only a 10% chance that one of 10 people in that group, like for each individual, there's a 10% chance if we had 10 people, there's a 10% chance that person 1 would intervene, that person 2 would intervene, that person 3 would intervene, so on and so forth. But 10% times 10 is 100%, right, for example. Now, it's not always 100%. It depends on the scenario, but I'm just saying for math. So that's kind of a callback to Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers used to tell kids, if there's a problem, find the helpers. There's always helpers out there, right? And it's what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, this exhausted middle. There are a bunch of good people out there, and it's time for all of you, right, who are good people to start doing good. It's not enough to be good. You have to do good, all right?
And it's not enough for you just to do the right thing for yourself.
Correct.
Right? Like these are the situations where you're truly evaluated.
Yeah, I mean, your merit as a human being, for me, isn't measured when it's easy or when it helps you. It's measured when you have to sacrifice. You know what I mean? Where are we time wise? I can't see on the screen. Can you pop that up on there?
38.
38. Nice. We're talking too much. Need to do some spot. We only have one sponsor today. It's GhostBed. Ghostbed.com/Drinking Bros. You know the beds.
You know the beds. You know that they're the best beds with the best recoil for when you're doing puzzles, right? So when you're laying in bed and your partner jumps in bed and you don't want your puzzle messed up, GhostBed's the spot. It's got the best recoil. It's got the smoothest bed there is. Got the mattress cover, so if you're in there doing puzzles and you don't want to spill your drink because you've got a big 500-word puzzle in bed, it's got the GhostBed, the mattress covers, so badass, so comfortable. The cooling technology, so if you want to do puzzles on it when it's in the middle of the summer, GhostBed's got the cooling technology, the sheets, the pillowcases, all of it, especially if you're fat like me, right? Go check them out, ghostbed.com/Drinking Bros. And if it's your puzzling place, it's got a 20-year warranty. You can do puzzles on that motherfucker for 20 years. What do you think about that, Dan? I know that's all you're doing your GhostBed is puzzles.
I think somebody of your intellectual capacity probably needs that 20 years to complete the puzzle. So it's a good thing that it has good recoil, too, because you get pretty aggressive when you're putting puzzles together. I mean, really, especially when you find those corner pieces, you get really excited.
Dude, you talk about getting aggressive, man. Whenever I get the whole out, do you start in the middle or you start on the outside?
I mean, I separate the pieces into edge pieces, and then I start working on them. It depends on the puzzle, though, right? Like if it's got a big picture in it, obviously you can start seeing those pieces and putting them together. Right? If there's like a face, you can see the eyeball or the ear or the nose or whatever like that.
Yeah. So I find the four corner pieces first, right? And then I go and do the edge pieces.
Yeah.
And then I start with like what you're talking about. Like there's a strategy, man. I could teach you. I could learn you if you wanted to learn.
Yeah, great. Why don't you do a PowerPoint and I'll watch the whole thing. I'll flip through it. Ghostbed.com/Drinking Bros. Get them dills. Variables affecting bystanders. So bystanders have been found to react differently depending on whether the situation is an emergency or non-emergency. In non-emergency situations, the way in which subjects were asked to help mattered. So in one experiment, students asked bystanders for a dime and found that when the student gave an explanation, such as saying their wallet had been stolen, the percentage of people who gave assistance was higher. Additional research using data collected by EMS officials when responding to an emergency indicated that the response of bystanders was correlated with the health severity of the situation. So, according to researchers, there are 5 characteristics of emergencies that affect bystanders. Emergencies involve threat of harm or actual harm. Emergencies are unusual and rare. The type of action, meaning that people are unprepared for it. The type of action required in an emergency differs from situation to situation. Emergencies cannot be predicted or expected. Emergencies require immediate action. This is why every single parent should know infant CPR, right? Because if you don't know that shit, if you don't drill it into your head, when it comes time to use it, it's your child. You're going to be freaking out. And if you don't know it like you know the back of your goddamn hand, you're not going to be able to do it properly. You should fucking train on that shit. Maybe Dakota can teach you. Due to these 5,
I think we'll do a month-long nanny school and become a certified nanny, and and I'm an infant care specialist.
Yeah, me too. Infant care specialist, but I didn't do the nanny thing. I was a CPR AED instructor at the adult and child level for a long time. So
I'm talking about raising them though. Like I'm talking about like learning how to swaddle and all that.
Oh yeah, like how to swaddle. People don't know what that means, right? Like wrap them up in a blanket.
Yeah.
Like those hippies. Hippies have their own fucking version of the baby Bjorn. It's just a long ass, like fucking 18-inch wide piece of fabric that's like 6 feet long, basically. Anyways, due to these 5 characteristics, bystanders go through cognitive and behavioral processes. 1, they notice that something is happening. 2, they interpret the situation as being an emergency or realize that it's an emergency. The degree of responsibility is felt. A form of assistance is considered, and then they implement the action choice. There's a lot of steps that happen, and they all happen very quickly. Ambiguity is one factor that affects whether or not a person assists another in need. In some cases of high ambiguity, it can take a person or a group up to 5 times as long before taking action than in cases of low ambiguity. For example, if 2 dudes are fighting, people don't really step in much, right? Because 2 dudes fighting, that's as rare as you might see that in public. That's probably the most common thing you would see, right? And I don't think that's something that people step into because it's at that point kind of considered mutual combat.
I wouldn't know. I've never been. I don't fight. I'm not into violence.
I'm into violence. I'm just not into fighting because I don't care to be. It's the same. Stop sending me shit. Bystanders are more likely to intervene in low ambiguity and insignificant consequence situations than in high ambiguity or significant consequence situations. Meaning, like if the guy's got a gun, people are less likely to get involved. Researchers suggest that in ambiguous situations, bystanders may look to one another for guidance and misinterpret others' lack of initial response as a lack of concern, which causes each bystander to decide that the situation is not serious. So everybody looks at each other and like, hey, why aren't you doing something? And instead of saying that out loud, they think it and don't want to answer the question themselves to the other person, like, why am I not doing something? That's what you should be asking, right?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's like when you're in class or you're in a group of people and you all don't know, like somebody said something you don't know and you see nobody else asking a question. They're like, are there any questions? There are no dumb questions. Nobody wants to ask it, right?
And then somebody does and 4 other hands go up right after that, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? It just takes one. It just takes that one leader, and it needs that in every crowd. And we just don't have them, right? Like society with these social issues are taking away leaders, taking away the confidence of leaders of how do you react in these situations? Because like everything is based off of emotions and what's socially accepted, not what's principle based.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of that. And one of the effects of the bystander effect is something called diffusion of responsibility. And it's what we were just talking about. So diffusion of responsibility is a socio-psychological phenomenon where a person is less likely to take responsibility for an action or inaction when other bystanders or witnesses are present. It's almost like risk spreading if you're a risk management person. So I know that if there are other people present, nobody is going to be able to blame me for what happened. Like they'll have to blame the group, and I can hide in a group.
Yeah.
Which is kind of pathetic. In the event of emergency, when people believe there are other people around, they are less likely or slower to help a victim because they believe someone else will take responsibility. They may assume that other bystanders are more qualified to help, such as doctors or police officers, and that their intervention would be unneeded. Well, that's a huge mistake. A good plan executed violently now is better than a perfect plan executed later. Right? That's a very old military premise. Like good is the enemy, or great's the enemy of good in that scenario. And
good is the enemy of great.
Well, I mean, no, that's a different thing. But yeah, you are correct about that. In this scenario, you could do what I said earlier. Maybe you don't know how to treat a certain type of wound, but you can fucking do something. You can do something. You can fucking be the person that goes and kneels down next to the person, clears their airway. You know how to do that at least. You know how to clear their, ABC. You should all know that. Airway, breathing, and fucking control the bleeding, motherfucker. Circulation. So you can do that, and then you can say, hey, is anybody a doctor? How hard is that?
Hey, did anybody call 911?
Yeah.
Hey, like, you know what I mean? Like,
there's also
hey,
good Samaritan laws. There's also good Samaritan laws in most states that a lot of people are worried that if they try to intervene on something, they're going to get in trouble as well. Like if the person dies. If somebody gets shot and you're trying to treat them and maybe you get in trouble or sued, but that's not how it works. So they may also be afraid of being superseded by a superior helper, offering unwanted assistance, or facing legal consequences. And some legislation, such as Good Samaritan laws, limit liability for those attempting to provide medical services and non-medical services in an emergency. I can tell you this. if you're an adult human being, you should, at this point in life, know CPR. You should know how to control bleeding. You could save somebody's life by being the first person there. The first responder is the first motherfucker there. It's not always EMS. It's not always fire. It's not always the police. It's the first motherfucker that can get their hands on the leg or arm or whatever is fucking bleeding. The first person that can grab that child that's choking and know the proper way to clear their airway. You could save that child's life. And all the information to know how to do that is available for free online right now. So if you're not taking advantage of that, I mean, that's the make your bed. When you're talking about taking care of other people, McCraven says make your bed to establish good habits. Learn CPR. Learn how to control bleeding, stuff like that. That is being a good neighbor. That's being a good Samaritan. That is being the kind of person that wakes up and makes their bed, who is disciplined.
Again,
right?
It's like in every situation, you are either one of two things: an asset or a liability. In every situation, you're either an asset or liability. You're not ever just existing.
Right. Yeah, and it's there's a million examples of this. Here's another one that we'll go over this one, and then we'll come back to the Philly thing here in a minute. On October 24th, 2009, a female student of Richmond High School was gang raped and beaten by a group of boys and men after a classmate invited her to a dark courtyard outside of the school's homecoming dance. It was reported that she was treated politely and drank brandy with the group before the assault took place, which lasted 2.5 hours before a young woman notified the police. As many as 20 people witnessed the incident, with several reportedly cheering and videotaping it. She was hospitalized for scrapes and bruises all over her face and body, and later sustained scars from cigarette burns on her back, as well as hips and the regular pop out of place. On Memorial Day 2011, 53-year-old Raymond Zach of Alameda, California, that's close to Oakland, walked into the waters off Robert Crown Memorial Beach, stood neck deep in water roughly 150 yards offshore for almost an hour. His foster mom called 911 and said that he was trying to drown himself. Firefighters and police responded but did not enter the water. The firefighters called for U.S. Coast Guard boat to respond to the scene. According to police reports, Alameda police expected the firefighters to enter the water, but the firefighters later said they did not have current training and certifications to perform water rescue. Dozens of civilians on the beach, watching from their homes and across the beach, did not enter the water, apparently expecting public safety officials to conduct a rescue. Eventually...
So this is a problem that I've seen in the fire service. It's been the biggest letdown of being in the fire service. Dude, I have watched literally people like this is no shit. The mentality of a lot of departments. It's not our emergency. Like, it's literally, that's the mentality, is it's not our emergency. We don't have certification in swift water, so we don't do swift water rescue.
Right.
Like, it doesn't fucking matter. When you like, and this has been, man, I'll tell you, I became a firefighter. I looked up to these guys, and I still do, some of them, but they don't take pride in their fucking craft. It has literally been one of the biggest letdowns of my life, watching how they find excuses to stay away from out of risk.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not our emergency. It's not your emergency. It is your fucking emergency. You, that's like Batman saying it ain't his fucking, it ain't his, this is too much for me. I've never faced this. When they dial 911 and you're toned out, it is your emergency. You don't get the option of saying it's too dangerous for me to go out there. If there is the possibility of you saving someone, you get your ass out there and you do whatever it fucking takes, even if it costs you your fucking life trying to save theirs.
Yeah, that's right. This guy, Zach, Raymond Zach, eventually collapsed from hypothermia. But even then, nobody entered the water for several minutes. Finally, a good Samaritan entered the water, somebody from the crowd, and pulled him to shore, but he died afterwards at a local hospital. So it's not just, the reason I added that last story isn't to, is to show you that it's not just untrained civilians, right, in groups that this happens to. It's the reason that the ICS, the incident management system, incident control, our command system rather, exists from actually it started with CAL FIRE, but FEMA kind of runs all that shit now. There's a reason there are rules and protocols for all this stuff, but there are no rules and protocols necessarily for you to respond to things as a private citizen. Just be ready to, right? If somebody needs your help, give it to them. That's pretty much the rule here. I thought that was the rule for all of us.
Well, I mean, you got to understand, like these people, these cops, these firefighters, these EMS, any first responder, even the people going and serving the military, they're no different than they're just civilians who decided to go into a different place, right? They're just civilians who decided to take this walk of life. They're no different than anybody else. And they just have training, right? And they've said, hey, they said, hey, I will put this responsibility on me to serve the community. And it's messed up, man. It's messed up. And this, I blame firefighters for this. I blame the good firefighters for the bad firefighters, right? Of the accountability of allowing these people to stay in. You know, I guarantee you, they did not get to that scene and not know that they would not go in there, right? I guarantee you they knew who would perform and who fucking wouldn't. We all do. And it's just messed up that we don't hold each other accountable and we don't weed out the weak. Like when people dial 911, they don't give a fuck what certification you are. They don't care if you're a volunteer. They don't care if you're paid. They don't care if you're how long you've been doing it or how long you haven't.
Right.
They expect you to show up and perform as if it was the Super Bowl of emergencies.
Right. Yeah.
Every fucking time. And that is exactly what they deserve. Like when I see fat cops or I see fat fucking firefighters or I see fat people who are serving the community and who are in these positions of where people need them and rely on them in their worst moments, I think it is a discrimination. It is a disgrace to the people who take it serious and take pride in the craft that those types of people are out there fucking doing it. Because you know what the problem is I've seen it in the, I'll just talk about the fire side of it. The people who are out of shape and the people who can't perform and the people who are fucking fat and lazy are the ones who bitch the most, who fucking beat down the guys who are trying it and who are killing and are cancers inside of these organizations.
Yeah.
And they're the same ones who go make this mentality of not my emergency. Well, yeah, because you couldn't do shit about it anyways because you're a lazy fuck.
Yeah, and it's a great example of just cultural decay. That's what it is. It is the unspoken agreement that all reasonable and rational human beings had that we were going to do things reasonably and rationally, and when somebody showed up that wasn't, we would stop them together. And this motherfucker in Philadelphia is, well, what you just said about institutions not policing themselves, not peering people out that don't belong there and stuff like that makes us all less safe. It also makes us less safe when fringe ideologies make their way to the mainstream and start allowing for the institutions that protect this country to be attacked by morons like defund the police or like shutting down border security and shit like that. This dude, Fiston Noy, it's Fiston space Ngoy, the guy that raped that woman on the SEPTA train in Philadelphia, originally came to the United States from, he's a Congolese person from, that came here in 2012 on a student visa. His visa was terminated in 2015 because he failed to remain a student, so clearly just came here, used the student excuse to get into the country. Meanwhile, court records show that he racked up, quote, multiple arrests, 2 misdemeanor convictions, 1 for controlled substances, and 1 for sexual abuse. He pled guilty in 2017 in Washington, D.C. to the sexual abuse misdemeanor and was sentenced to 120 days in prison and 9 months probation. He was put in an immigration detention in January 2018. However, he was never deported because he received a, quote, withholding of removal, which is basically an injunction to keep him in the country, from an immigration judge in March of 2019 after the Board of Immigration Appeals found that his misdemeanor sex offense was, quote, not a serious crime that would have made him ineligible for such a stay. As a result, Noy was released and only had to report to ICE under an order of supervision. And the Department of Homeland Security says these orders involve conditions being placed on those who have been temporarily released from custody, temporarily involving regular check-ins. So this is a man who is here illegally, who clearly gamed the system, who has sexually assaulted someone before, been convicted and pled guilty for it. And because of how broken our system is, because we've allowed this cultural decay to permeate, because nobody was willing to stand up and say no when they knew it was the right thing to do, because these liberal motherfuckers who know this is fucking bullshit, because they don't want to get roasted by their friends or kicked out of their party or lose their election or whatever the fuck else, wouldn't stand up and say no, and now this woman's life is fucked. That shit's on you guys, right? But it's on all of us, really, because anytime you allow that fucking shit to go on at the low level, then it's going to happen at the high level, because there's crazy people out there that cannot be controlled. You assume that if we set up these fucking roadblocks, these minor roadblocks, yeah, it'll stop most reasonable people. But an asshole like this who's fucking assaulted somebody before, it's not going to stop him. These people are fucking predators.
And this is something we all have the power to stop, right? Like we have the power to stop what's right and what's wrong. We have the power, because if we do it, if we do it when we see it, or if we know somebody's doing it, we all have the power to cut down on all this shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a little kid. If you let them get away with small shit, they're going to try bigger and bigger shit. It's just how it is.
And if you say, well, it's not my problem, or, if you can sit on a train and watch another human being be raped right in front of you and not do anything because you're worried about what consequences, or if you might get in trouble, or all this other stuff, or you might get your ass beat, or whatever, or the danger it might put you in. Do you really want to live in that world anyways? Like, you got to ask yourself that question, right? Like, do you want to live in a country, in a world to where other human beings can be raped and no one do anything? If the woman getting raped on that train doesn't deserve help from you or anybody else, at what point in life do you even fucking deserve anybody to help you, to step up and go out of their way to do something for you? What in your life could you ask for fucking help and deserve it if this woman on this train getting raped doesn't deserve fucking help? Ask yourself that question.
It's a good question, and we'll get your answer later, because right now we'll see you in hell.
See you in hell.